Welcome back, everybody, to Ravenstar's Witching Hour. I'm Solaris BlueRaven. I'm here with my excellent guest tonight, Dr. Clarissa Cole. And I hear you over there. Are you with me?
Yes, I am.
Awesome. Well, it's incredible information tonight. I so appreciate you coming on board with us. This is very, very interesting. A little disturbing, but very interesting in general. I think people need to be up to speed. Sometimes we don't address these issues or investigate further insofar as what's going on, what's the cause and effect, or there's so many things I can go on so many different levels with. We did have another question here. Let's see. This was actually from Mark. I think he's Mark Eddy. It's
Hey.
It's what is the symbolic expression of some doctors wanting to inject patients with needles? Is it a sign that they are impotent? Does that make sense?
Oh gosh. Well, I don't inject anyone, so I don't know. With the symbology of that is again beyond my scope, I think. Okay. And besides, it's mostly the nursing staff that is doing that. If you want to be technical.
Well, that's Mark for you, though. But yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that would make sense right there. There's another one here from let's see, Diet Joke here. Has the guest had any parapsychological experiences while at work?
Not personally, but I do know, and I think honestly, because I usually when I've been there during the busiest hours of the day,
Mm-hmm.
so there's so much commotion that I think it's really hard to sit and listen, to what might be going on or what I'm feeling. But I did have guys, multiple guys, patients of mine tell me about things that they experienced, and I knew that they weren't crazy. I knew they weren't psychotic. I knew that what they were experiencing was something, that was going on. And, some guys were, outright scared. And that's saying a lot, considering there's a lot to be scared of at a place like San Quentin that is not paranormal. And when they're afraid about something paranormal, you know that there's something going on. There's on the block that I worked on East Block, there is someone that goes up and down the tiers that is no longer alive, I'm guessing.
Mm-hmm.
They talk about it, about seeing somebody that goes past the cells, and it was very disturbing to a lot of guys.
It makes a lot of sense to me when you have that much negativity. And it seems to me that people were, obviously they die there, a lot of them do.
Mm-hmm.
It would tell me that maybe they weren't able to leave, or maybe there's something that's keeping their energetic, or at least there's an imprint or a signature around somewhere. That's really interesting. Yeah, I could see that going on. There's no doubt about it.
Well, there were guys that were occasionally afraid of other guys, too, because they thought that they were more than crazy, that there was something else going on with them that was darker.
Like possession?
Yeah. There were guys that were given a very, and again, this is also rare for a place like San Quentin, when someone is given a wide berth. That doesn't happen. The place is very crowded. People go about their business. When you see a guy that is given a wide berth, even on the yard, something's wrong.
Wow. That's really interesting. Well, I do believe in evil. I mean, I see it all the time. So sometimes you have to wonder the essence of it, where it really originated from. There's some things that are just too vicious. There's just something going on there on a very deep level. It's very, very interesting. Is there a specific time of year when violent crimes increase?
There are always periods of, times of year, and I was I dealt with suicide a lot there. I was the suicide prevention coordinator at San Quentin for a while. So, self-violence of, suicide is violence toward the self, and other violence typically around the holidays, that's a very rough time for the guys. And if there is an anniversary date of maybe their crime, so it depends on the individual. But usually holidays are worse than not, and wintertime is always worse than summer.
That's interesting. Yeah.
I feel like in the summer it's hot. There's other things to do. Like most of San Quentin is not air conditioned. So a lot of those units get disturbingly hot, and, guys are, just laying around on the tiers. But then when it starts to get cooler again, the activity always becomes worse.
Mm-hmm. Right. And do you see it more on the male side than the female side insofar as these psychopaths go, or is it just equal insofar as crime?
It seems to be about equal. I generally don't counsel. I have counseled female inmates, but it's been quite a long time. But we don't see a difference really between male and female.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I applaud you for the work you do, Clarissa. I think it's incredible.
Thank you.
I couldn't do it, honestly. It's not because I'm afraid. It's just that I just get angry when I think about people like that. That's all I can say. But especially, I can only imagine the parents and the people that were victimized. The families that were.
Well, and that's where it's weird because people, they say, oh, it's great work that I do, but I did try very early in my career when I first started as a psychologist, I tried to work with victims and victims' families, and that was so hard for me. I feel like that is where it takes a very strong person to be able to be, because as a counselor, you need to be strong for them too, and show that they can get through it. And there were some victims that I came across in my work where I wanted to break down and cry in the session because it was just so painful. And I realized that maybe that's not where I was best utilized. So I very much look up to people that can talk to the victims and their families all the time, because that to me is where the real pain is. And that I felt like that was just too hard for me.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I can only imagine some of the heartbreak that goes through, just having the loss of a loved one naturally versus just something that takes them out, some vicious act that just takes them away. There's another question here from B. Radley. It's, is it possible that these psychopaths hate themselves so much that they have no answer but to bring others down to their level of self-loathing? And if their targeted victim won't do that, then maybe they would resort to extreme measures, aka murder if necessary.
With a psychopath, again, I don't think that they have the same capacity for human emotion, so I don't generally believe that in their case. But with 90% of the other guys in prison, absolutely. I mean, that's a really astute observation, because I think that is very often the case, that it's somebody that maybe wanted to get out of their criminal environment, wanted to escape that always had very high aspirations for themselves, and then something happened in their life where they didn't achieve what they wanted to, and they're angry and they hate themselves in such a deep way that violence begins to feel like the only way that they can express how they're feeling. I mean, I see that all the time, and that's why I say that there's crying in prison, because by the time I see a lot of these guys, maybe they've been in for 20 years, they've had 20 years to think about it, and feeling terrible isn't even the word. I mean, the depth of remorse and self-loathing and that they feel is I mean, the ocean doesn't begin to cover it.
Right. Well, it's interesting because if they're put away for that long, it seems to me like that's such a dark place to be, that it would be such an empty place for the soul or the spirit if they had one. How can you heal your body when the spirit is being oppressed? When you think about those locations, prison in general, it's not a very nice place. Obviously, that it's just not a good place for anybody to be.
No, it's a terrible place to be, but that to me was the best part about being a psychologist in that environment, was being able to talk to them and look at them. If I felt that they really felt remorse and they really wanted to change, I would look at them and say, if you can find hope in here, if you can find a way to bring up other people around you, help the young guys that haven't gotten their GEDs yet, if you can volunteer and find a way to be useful in here and be hopeful in here, you can succeed anywhere. Because this is the most hopeless place on earth. If you can maintain your hope and maintain being a pro-social person that doesn't hurt anybody else ever again, you'll make it on the outside.
Yeah. I'll tell you what. Yep. There's another question here from Zippy2400. Could the doctor talk about mind control tactics and effects of lowering natural defense mechanisms? I suspect this is for Studio A. As an example, the new tactics of presenting killings followed by Miss Universe contest, then more killings followed by sports, then switching to a Soloft advertisement.
Oh, just like with the media?
Yeah, so propaganda type, yeah.
Oh, definitely. No, there's absolutely, I mean, this is very frustrating for me as an individual that works with these guys. It's so frustrating to see the absolute sort of sensationalism of the media for, these violent activities, and then yet it's kind of normalized at the same time. It's so bizarre, to have an extremely violent story, and then the very next thing is, an advertisement for like Toys R Us or something. It's I don't know what they're doing, the media, but they make us fear things that we shouldn't, and they make us ignore things that we shouldn't. It's very frustrating.
Yeah, it's very, very bizarre. Well, I believe in situation awareness, and I think most people, I hope they still have that, to a point where they're not getting misled by media, excuse me, and a lot of mainstream propaganda, because I certainly see a lot of that going on, without a doubt.
The biggest propaganda point for me working with sex offenders was that whole, do you remember that whole stranger danger campaign? that hurt America, it hurt victims, and it helped sex offenders more than any single campaign that I have ever seen. Stranger danger, the vast majority of sexual offense, I mean, I'm talking less than 5%. So an incredibly small sliver happens from strangers. Less than 5%. And yet for years, everybody was telling their children, stranger danger, stay away from strangers. And yet it was never the strangers committing these sex offenses. What was that about?
Exactly.
I mean, that campaign set us back as a culture.
Yeah, there seems to be an awful lot of that going on still, if you ask me. Too many things going on. I mean, obviously you hear things about, Craigslist and things like that where there's these crazy, crazy violent crimes that come through. And honestly, I think anybody with situation awareness would just pay attention not to do stupid things like, I certainly wouldn't go through Craigslist to get a roommate or something like that. You hear these horror stories.
But I mean, that's what the media is telling you about. They're telling you about that one instance on Craigslist, whereas there are how many kids in your own communities right now being abused by family members, friends, coaches, priests. Why aren't we hearing about that?
Exactly. That's a very good point you make right there. No, I see it. I see it more and more. And I mean, I don't know if you follow what's going on outside the U.S. and like in Europe, for example, but a lot of women are getting molested by these immigrants that are happening. And they're trying to tell them that it's, to be okay with that. That's pretty much what they're telling them. Merkel's telling, her own people this, and that's not okay. I mean, so I can look at things on different levels and really see what's appropriate, what's not. But it seems to me like common sense that when you assault somebody sexually, that's obviously a crime. And you should
it absolutely is a crime, and it's not treated like a crime, and even here.
Yeah.
I think it is more rampant, especially with certain cultures where it's not considered a crime or it's even considered honorable in certain cases. But I feel like America should be above that. I feel like, if we're supposedly so, evolved, that we should always be taking this as the most serious crime. And yet I see people getting off and walking. I mean, the average stint in prison for a rape, a brutal rape, the most you can get is 7 years if it's your first offense, and the most amount of time that most people spend in prison is, 18 months?
Oh, wow. That's terrible. And I'm sure they come out and do it again, right?
Of course they do, because they've had no rehabilitation. And if you're a rapist, you're still a rapist when you get out. There's been no change there if you've had no treatment.
Oh, wow. That's terrible. Yeah, the system's really messed up. Don't you think the system in general is just dysfunctional, period?
Oh, gosh, yes. So, yeah, I can say that without hesitation, but that's part of the reason that I wanted to work inside of it, was because I knew that just trying to attack it from the outside or trying to get that change to happen and not understanding what is happening, it was not going to help.
Right. That makes sense. I feel sorry for the police that have to work there. I understand very clearly what they have to deal with from day to day. I mean, I've worked in the background of surveillance, but I worked with law enforcement a lot in the past. And I'll tell you, it's really ridiculous. Some people don't understand the kind of toxicity they're around 24 hours a day.
Oh, gosh, no. I mean, my God. And I saw that all the time. I was always so, deferential, really, and to a lot of the officers that I worked with, because I was only seeing, going onto the unit a few hours every day, and then the rest of the time I'd be doing other things related to my job. They were there for 12-hour shifts. Sometimes they pulled doubles. It was so toxic, the yelling, the negativity, the hatred, and then for them to always respond in the quote-unquote PC perfect manner all the time, it's tough.
Right.
It's really tough.
I imagine they have their own counsels and counseling and things like that as well.
Oh, yeah, they totally do. And I mean, I counseled a lot of them myself just, informally, because I knew their jobs were hard.
Right. And I think people tend to forget that in mainstream. They see all this stuff going on with officers here and there, and of course mainstream media tries to highlight the dark side of the police departments, but truly they really are under a lot of pressure and a lot of abuse, and I don't think people understand that at all.
Well, and the abuse that they just have to literally smile and take too. People don't understand. Like in a prison environment, if you're working an 8-hour shift, you're getting spit at, screamed at, physically assaulted. It is constant, because with a lot of these guys, they do have no respect, not just for authority, but especially not for cops. And they know the rules, and they know what they can get away with. And so they push it as far, because they're antisocial, right? They push it as far as they can, kind of daring the officer to do something about it. And this happens every day, day after day, for years on end for some of these guys. I mean, it's terrible. It's an incredibly stressful job.
Well, they taunt them. So what kind of disciplinary actions are taken when they're spitting and doing this? They just let them get away with it?
No, if they've been spitting, they usually there is a write-up, but if it's due to something like psychosis, they don't get punished for it, because they are psychotic, but they might have to wear a spit mask. The guy has to wear a spit mask before he's taken out of his cell. He might go to ADSEG for a couple of days, at most. But in general, there isn't a whole lot they can do about it. And I remember this in the state hospital after being assaulted multiple times at the state hospital, usually when I was trying to break up another assault. I can't even tell you how many times I had to go through the hepatitis C protocol because of the amount of times that I was covered in either saliva, blood, or worse.
Oh, jeez.
This happened to me on a regular basis, so much so that the Hep C protocol ends after 6 months. I could never get off the protocol because just when I was about to get off the protocol for testing, something else would happen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It was constant. And thinking about, and I wasn't at the time, I didn't have, a family and things like that to worry about, but I thought, my God, what if you're a father or a mother and you have to go home to your significant other that night and say, hey, babe, for the next 6 months, I have to get tested for Hep C because I was exposed to that blood today on purpose.
That's terrible.
I'm sorry. Yeah. And that happened all the time.
Mm-hmm. I'm so glad you got out of that state hospital. I've talked to other people who've worked in areas like that too. I don't know how you do it. Like I said, I've applauded anybody who's been able to do that because I don't think I would have the tolerance for that. I really don't. I'm not real tolerant to evil people. And the way I see them as evil, I don't see them as like, obviously they're mentally ill and maybe they're psychopaths and this and that, but I just see them as plain evil. And to me, the death penalty seems like the only way out. And I know that sounds really harsh, but what is your take on the death penalty in general? When it gets to the level where they're just violent 24 hours a day, you can't help them. They're not able to be assisted in any form of design. What do you do?
I agree. I think that the people at the state hospital, that's more due to mental illness. And I will forever have a soft spot for that. I do love my really mentally ill patients. We get along well, and I like them. They like me. But when it comes to death row, the guys on death row, the guys who have been sentenced there, I do believe in the death penalty, but I also believe that to be effective, the death penalty needs to be enacted quickly. Mm-hmm. And that's not just a belief I have. There have been multiple studies that show that the only states where the death penalty is effective at deterring crime are states that enact the death penalty within about 6 to 7 years of being incarcerated. Mm-hmm. States like Texas. Right. It does deter crime because it's enacted swiftly. In states like California, where we actually haven't put anybody to death since 2007, it does nothing to deter crime.
That's ridiculous. What's going on? Why is it so slow? What's happening with that?
Well, I was there for the last one that occurred, and it went fine. That one went fine. But after that, there was a botched one in Florida, where the cocktail of the drugs that they gave for the lethal injection, and in California, actually, it's not just the lethal injection. The gas chamber is still working. But in Florida, they botched it somehow, where the meds didn't do what they were supposed to do, and he ended up suffering for about 15 minutes before he expired. Mm-hmm. And a bunch of people protested and said that it was inhumane. And so then California, we stopped doing it out here because they were worried about the same thing. And we have protests in California, huge, like trying to get to work at San Quentin when somebody's about to be put to death, just trying to get through the line of protesters is almost impossible. No, they scream hateful things at you. They bang on your car windows. They egg your car. They say you're a killer.
What?
That was when I started. I started at San Quentin the week that they were putting this person to death. And my car was egged. My windows were pounded on. I had to go through 100 protesters saying that I was a killer.
You need
for
a
putting
medal.
this person to death.
I swear to God, you need him.
That's like sort of the culture out here is that death row is evil, not the people that are on it. And these are people that have never dealt with these guys ever. Or they deal with them when they're writing letters. They have letter writing campaigns to people on the outside. Mm-hmm. Do they think that's really the real prisoner? Are we serious?
Wow, they're so misled, I swear.
Well, it's so naive to think that that's the real person. My God, the guy that they put to death, he wrote a children's book, and published it, had it published in the Bay Area, and he laughed about it all the way to the table.
Wow, I'm amazed that they have empathy for these killers. It blows me away. That tells me that there's something wrong with them. Like there's something psychologically not right with these people. I don't understand that at all, because if you had a child that was murdered by one of these guys and he's on death row, I'd be looking forward to that guy getting killed. Sorry, I would.
Yeah, of course. He had multiple victims, and the fact that they are now standing in protest and banging on my car windows, calling me a killer. I'm there to help rehabilitate so this doesn't happen again. I'm the furthest thing from a killer. And for them to be hatefully screaming at me that I'm a killer because I guess I'm working at an institution that is putting a known murderer to death, it escapes me. I don't understand it.
Yeah, it's crazy. This world is really strange. I tell you what. Well, what's your take on Charles Manson? He's a prime example of somebody that's just. I can't believe he's still alive, and I can't believe he's still. I think he was up for parole, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, and actually, I hate to say it, I won't be able to comment on him for that reason.
Okay, no,
I apologize.
That's okay.
He'll be one of my guys coming up. So.
Oh, really? Oh, you
Yeah.
can't talk about it. That's all right. But I
Yeah,
thought that was
sorry.
interesting. No, it's okay. Yeah, so I was just curious because there's so much going on with that. But anyways, we'll switch gears to something else here for sure. So let's talk a little bit about some other cases you've investigated that were kind of disturbing. If you want to cover some of those.
Sure. I mean, there's a whole different gamut. People always tend to put serial killers in the same basket. Like they're all psychopaths, and that could not be further from the truth. There are many psychological disorders that factor into killing and even serial killing. And when it comes to like serial killer duos, people that do it, and there are a lot of them, and there's a lot more than people think. We all know about, say, like Bonnie and Clyde, right? And people like that. And Natural Born Killers was a movie made about Charles Starkweather and Carol Ann Fugate. That's what people know about. But serial killer duos happen all the time, and it's not just in these love duos, that where they're lovers, but maybe two guys will get together that end up talking someday over a beer and realize that they both have the same proclivities, and then they end up killing. It's a very weird phenomena because usually one of them is a psychopath, but the other one typically is not. And that's what's so interesting to me about it, is that because two psychopaths would not get along.
Like beta
they both
fish.
want to have control. They're both the boss, right?
Right.
So in these serial killer duos, it's usually one person who's a psychopath and they're kind of leading the show, and then there's somebody with a host of different symptoms that typically do not become murderous. And that's what makes them interesting to me. They do have other psychological disorders, but they're disorders that typically don't turn violent.
Wow. But they support the one who is violent.
Because they feel a love for them. They're either in love with them or they very much look up to them, like a serial killer duos where it's two men, for example, and they're not involved. Usually the one who's not a psychopath really looks up to the one who is. Like they see them as the alpha male, the strong one that they always wanted to be. They romanticize it.
Right. Wow. Wouldn't that be part of a delusion?
In some ways it's usually part of borderline personality disorder or like a dependent personality disorder where they do kind of become delusional about that person's power. They believe them to be the god that they're selling themselves as. And then they do things that are completely against their nature, for that person.
Right. It seems to me like people need a moral compass. They need more of an internal spiritual compass. That's just my impression. Otherwise, that gives you a benchmark of good behavior, if you ask me. So,
yeah. Well, yeah. And what happens with these people that they, because they're typically people that, like I said, may not become violent if they hadn't met that person. But how are they so, I guess, easily led? I mean, that is always kind of a conundrum to me.
Dominated for sure. It's almost like a form of mind control to some degree. We have another question here in the chat from Diet Joke. Let's see here. Since psychopaths don't have any empathy, can they really be classed as human? And if yes, then doesn't that cheapen what it is to be a human being?
Oh, gosh. That's a deep question and a good one. It's weird because, what defines us as human, if you're going strictly biologically, right, would be our DNA. So in that way, are they human? Sure. But I don't know. I'm a romantic too, despite what I do. I am. And I do think that part of what makes a human so special, so wonderful, is our ability to empathize if we use it appropriately. And in that way, I don't feel like they have that piece that when you look into someone else's eyes and you see it, just that ability to be humane, they don't have that. And so when you look into their eyes, it is kind of flat. It's bizarre. It is almost looking like, I don't know if you believe in aliens, it kind of feels that way a little bit.
Like entity possession or something, yeah. Well, no soul, no spirit. They always say the eyes are the windows to the soul. And I'm sure you've probably looked into people's eyes that are just, there's nobody there.
I describe it as, and this is only from my upbringing in the Midwest, because I used to go fishing with my dad. But you know what a fish? It's a terrible example, but what a fish looks like after they're dead, the cold, dead fish eye.
Yeah.
That's what a psychopath is like.
Very interesting.
There's no depth there at all.
See, that's what I mean, empty space. And I'm real big on looking at people's eyes, because you can see the frequency and you can see the soul and the spirit. And yeah, you can certainly tell a lot by their eyes and how they're moving their eyes. What about body language for some of these psychopaths? Do you ever pay attention to the body language? Is there a giveaway with that?
Well, what's great, not great, sorry, I tend to be flippant about it, I apologize. What is interesting about it is that they, typically a psychopath, since they are not feeling their own feelings, they're very good social chameleons. So when I'm in a room with a psychopath, they typically mimic my body language.
Ah, very interesting.
So when I see a guy that is immediately mimicking how I'm sitting, how I'm gesturing, kind of the same tone of my voice,
wow,
I know I might be in for trouble.
Oh my goodness, that reminds me of, what was it, Silence of the Lambs or something like that?
Uh-huh.
Oh man, yeah, those are creepy. That's creepy stuff, let me tell you. We have another question here. I love the questions, you guys. Thank you for the questions. Zippy 2400 is, let's see here. What does the doctor think about chemical castration for rapists? And a doc where I live promotes that as the best solution.
That's gosh, I dealt with that in Texas. Another very good question. Chemical castration, just for maybe people that may not know what that is, it's usually a shot of Depo-Provera. And Depo-Provera with men typically makes it much more difficult for them to sustain an erection, to get sexually aroused, right? So with a lot of pedophiles or rapists, some states it is legal or to do the chemical castration. But I don't know. I don't know if this is too much detail. I typically found it to be very ineffective for both rapists and pedophiles, and I really do apologize if this is too graphic.
No, we're late night, so if you have children, cover their ears. Go ahead.
Please do. If they cannot offend with getting an erection, they will offend with objects or with their hands. So I did not find it to be effective. So
wow, so they're just really just plain sick in general. There's just no hope for that.
No, because the urge is still there to offend. I mean, whether they get sexually aroused or not. And with pedophilia and with rape in particular, God, the misunderstanding about this, rape is not about sex. It has never been about sex. It is about power, domination, and hatred. So chemically castrating a rapist does nothing.
Right. Well, that makes perfect sense right there. And you see an awful lot of that going on, I swear. What's your take on, I know you have on your website, you touch on H.H. Holmes, and I interviewed Jeff Mudgett, who's his great-grandson. He has the
No, really?
Yes, I did, and I was wondering if you've ever encountered him, because I could probably get you in touch with him. But what's your take on that? He suffers from some interesting symptoms that, he's had seizures, he's had issues with hearing voices. And I just wonder, what do you think the legacy is when it comes down to an ancestral line? Say you have someone in your ancestors who's like that. So what's your take on the genetics involved?
Well, it's weird, because I don't know if being a psychopath, if that's a genetic defect. I guess we could call it a defect because it's different, right, than what is usually seen in humans. But I do know that H.H. Holmes's daughter, Lucy, was an extraordinary human being on many levels. So do I think that if there's a psychopath in your family, or, somebody that was psychopathic, that it's going to be passed down? There's actually no evidence that it is passed down. I think that the outlook is actually incredibly hopeful in some ways. I don't know why the psychopath gene is activated in some people, but it doesn't seem to be heritable that we're aware of. But could there be other genetic things at play? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, you should read his book, Bloodstains. I don't know if you've read it or not, but
I have not. I'm very interested, though. That is fascinating.
I'll send you the information on it. Yeah, you'd probably be fine. I actually can send you the interview I did with Jeff. It's really interesting. He does. He is a very good person, very good soul, but he's had some interesting experiences around that whole legacy. So I find that interesting in general. And do you see? A lot of these people were touching on how they. Obviously, they do and have committed crimes, but have you ever seen really anybody who's been totally innocent that's gotten put away and just basically got set up?
There was one that I really do think he was innocent. And it's rare that I think that, I will be honest. I really do. I think he was innocent, and I feel awful for this kid because there isn't any sort of DNA that can exonerate him, and that's really what we need these days is DNA. It's sad, like nothing else exonerates people. It's really sad. But he was involved in gang violence where he was going on a first date. He was driving his car, and he stopped at a gas station to get gas because he wanted plenty of gas to take this girl to the movies. He was very excited to take her to the movies. He was maybe 17 at the time. Stopped at a gas station, but he's from Oakland. It's a bad place to be from sometimes. And he was in a gang-infested neighborhood, but that's where he grew up, but he was not a bad kid. And he was at a gas station when the gas station was, the two cars pulled up with rival gang members in them. A bunch of crossfire occurred. He was hit by a bullet, and the store clerk was killed. And the cars then drove away, and they dumped their guns as they drove away, dumped their guns in the parking. He went down with a shot to the leg, and the liquor store across the street, the guy saw it happen, ran over and picked up the kid, called 911 and picked him up and said, "Oh my God, are you okay?" He was worried he was going to bleed out. And when the cops got there, they arrested the kid for the murder of this shop owner, even though the liquor store owner was saying, "I saw the whole thing. This kid was hit with gunfire. He did not do this." But he says he's innocent. I tend to believe him. The evidence seems to say that as well. His fingerprints were not found on any of the weapons that were dropped. But the people that did do the shooting are high-level gang people, and if he tries to get out of prison, his entire family will probably be slaughtered by them, and he knows it.
Wow, that's terrible. And that's another thing too. You see all these criminal gangs, yet there's really no crackdown. I mean, they're just rogue. It seems to me like they're just all over the place, and
gosh, yeah,
they don't
especially Oakland.
Yeah. So why is that? Why are they allowed to get away with that behavior? Are the police just afraid of them, or what's happening?
That is a lot of it. I think that they're, at this point now, the gangs are much more savvy than they used to be. Like, they used to get the gang tattoos, you could see them coming sort of a thing. They're not now. They're recruiting younger people that have no tattoos, that are upwardly mobile. They're putting people in police departments.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they're getting officers into the prison system. So in some ways, they're in control of some of it. And also in Oakland, after dark, I wouldn't want to be a cop either.
Yeah, I really feel sorry for them at this point. But, it seems to me like it was an animal getting out of control. They literally should have done something about it many, many years ago.
Yes, agreed.
And now it's just so infiltrated. That's interesting that that's happening. But I'm very concerned about that. Once again, we were talking about the youth of America. It's just, man, it's scary for people to see this kind of stuff going on. I mean, we live in our own little subdivisions and worlds, but when you start looking out and around, you start seeing this stuff. And, yeah, it's just not good at all. And I think I asked you before, but have you investigated a case where your life was actually threatened? I know you've been assaulted, but have you been stalked or threatened in that form?
Yes, but it was not by inmates. It was by cops.
That's interesting. Wow.
Yeah, unfortunately. And this was way back when I was in Texas. So not anything in California. It's been fine here. But when I was in Texas and I was scheduled to work with the sex offenders, and I was working with and these were sex offenders that were not incarcerated. I should be clear about that. They were in the community. They were either on parole or on probation, but they would have had no rehabilitation without me. They would have had nothing. They would have been on parole anyway. They just would have had no classes or groups or therapy. So I was working with them to try to ensure that they didn't do this again. And one of the cops that was assigned to protect me from the sex offenders down there, because we're all walking out to our cars together. You know what I mean? Me and a bunch of, guys who were convicted of rape and pedophilia. He was assigned to protect me. He actually started calling in death threats against me.
Wow. Because
he did not like that I was working with these sex offenders. He didn't like that I was treating them like they were human, is kind of what he said.
Man, that's interesting.
And the most interesting part about that was one time I remember getting a flat tire not long after these death threats started, and it was my sex offenders that hung around and protected me from him.
Oh, that's wild.
And changed my tire for me.
Yeah. Did he ever
that I could get out of the parking lot safe.
Did he ever get prosecuted or anything, or what happened?
Nope. They just changed his shift.
Interesting.
And it was
Yeah.
proven that it was him. Everybody knew that it was him. He should have been convicted. But I mean, and that's kind of what changed my mind about working with a lot of these guys too, is that they didn't have to help me. You know, they were all leaving group. They have other things to do. Last thing they want to do is come to a sex offender group. They could tell that I was scared. And when I got a flat tire, they voluntarily stayed there and changed it for me because they could tell that I was worried about something. I didn't tell them what it was. It wasn't any of their business. But that's how I knew that even despite what people have done, there is humanity there. But can you tap into it enough to stop it from happening? And that I don't have an answer to.
Right. And that's another thing too. Yeah, I wish everybody would step up to a higher level of what I call consciousness, higher consciousness. You know, it would, yeah, there's just a lot of work, but you put a big dent in a lot of this, I suspect, with the work that you've been doing. So, like I said, I applaud you for that alone. You know, it gives us a little bit of hope, but still, there's so much that needs to be dealt with here on this timeline. It's not even funny. There's no doubt. You know, it's interesting because there's no way to negotiate with a psychopath. I mean, you can't rationalize with somebody or someone like this, right? Yeah. So
oh gosh, no. A psychopath has his own agenda, and I think the only way to like maybe negotiate with them is to convince them that it's in their best interests not to kill you.
Wow.
Or assault you. I've actually been in a conversation like that, believe it or not, where there was a guy that I knew wanted to assault me and had the opportunity to do it, and I could see him about to spring forward out of his feet, and there was no shackles and there was no cage. And I looked at him in that moment and I said, think about it. They're coming down the hall right now. Is it worth it?
Oh, good for you.
And he looked at me and then he sat down and said, no, it's not.
Yeah.
And that was it. And then we still had a therapeutic relationship after that, but I knew he wanted to assault me in that moment. He was very angry at me specifically, but he knew that the cost benefit for him, he would have gone to the hole for a month. It wasn't worth it.
Right. And the hole is what? Isolation?
Yeah, it's usually some sort of solitary confinement, and I knew him. He really thrived on sort of having that social interaction, and he liked being out, not having to be in a cage when he talked to me. So I knew that the thought of that going away was more important to him than assaulting me in that moment.
Right. And what about writing a book about all of your experiences? Have you done that?
I have not done that yet. I would like to eventually. I think it's hard because I'm still an active psychologist out here, and so there's a lot of stuff I can't write about yet.
Right. Well, yeah, I think Mark said that you wrote a romance novel. Is that true?
I did.
Oh my gosh!
I did
How
write
do you
a romance
switch gears?
novel.
How did you do that? Between all this and then you do something else, right?
I wanted to do something that was like lovey and nice because it gets dark after a while. I think everybody goes through that where, you've been doing it for so many years and it kind of gets to you. I wanted to write something that was the polar opposite of that.
Wow, I think that's great. What's the name of your book?
Well, it is not out. I have not released it. I had a deal with Entangled and then they pulled it because, get this, I was a little bit too dark for them.
Really? Oh my.
Yeah, I can't imagine why. So it has not been published yet.
Wow, well, I'm looking forward to that. Let us know, and we'll help promote it.
Will do. It sounds good. Thank you.
I have a sister that writes romance novels, by the way.
Do you?
Yeah, she does. I don't write that stuff, but yeah, she's into it. So yeah.
Oh, good for her.
Let's get in touch with
Very
her.
cool.
She makes money. Yeah. So far as we talked about the animal torture a little bit, but with all this stuff that's going on, you see these people torturing, whether it's animals or even people. They're beating them up and they're putting it on social media. Why do you think these people aren't getting arrested or prosecuted? It seems to me like they're not even being addressed.
That is beyond me. I don't understand. But I don't understand why, as a culture, we don't take animal abuse more seriously. Because just doing what I do, I know that animal abuse and animal torture leads to other things. It does not stop there. So even if you don't, for whatever reason, if you don't care about the animal that's being tortured, keep in mind that it leads to other things.
Oh, it certainly does. It's interesting because I don't know. Like I said, I just see more and more of this stuff going on the internet, and I'm very concerned about what's going on with people's brainwave activity, so to speak. It just seems like there's something happening there.
I agree, and I do think too that they're again choosing. I hate to use this term lightly, but soft targets. They're choosing animals, or in some cases, homeless people, people that society kind of turns away from anyway. So they're choosing their victims very carefully, which again scares me because that means there's a level of criminal savvy there that I wouldn't want to see. And some of these people are quite young. It scares me.
Right. Yeah, I agree with you on that one. So, do you have any suggestions for anybody who might be involved with unknowingly someone who's a psychopath, or anything that you can give them insofar as advice for how to detect it, or what to do? Warning signs?
Well, with a psychopath, there are many, many psychopaths or people that fall on that scale of psychopathy that they are not incarcerated, and that do relatively pro-social things. But if it's somebody that seems to have no empathy for your feelings, like ever, especially when you're in pain, if they mock you when you're in pain, that's a typical sort of psychopathic thing to do. If they tease you, if that's their way of getting out of an argument, is to tease you for your supposed weakness, that's a psychopath sort of thing to do. If they taunt you, make fun of you, if they are very easy for them to stonewall you, like it seems like they could care less whether they ever speak to you again, that sort of behavior. It's not only childish, but it is on that level of psychopathy, very grandiose. They're always right. They never apologize. Try not to offend them necessarily, because they could be dangerous, and I don't want to say that they wouldn't be. I don't know. But if you come across somebody like that, get out. It is likely not going to get better. It's not a phase that they're going through, and it's not just that they're not feeling for you right now. It might be that they can't. And always know that if you are a normal person with empathy and you get hurt by these people, you can do better. You will do better.
Right. Well, that's what comes to mind are these women that are in these abusive relationships that seem to just not break orbit with it. It's just like they tolerate, whether it's an abusive male or somebody who's potentially psychotic like that, or they just seem to want to be in that environment. And I for the life of me, I can't figure out why they want to do that instead of just leaving.
It's very easy for them to control them, though, because that's another thing psychopaths are very good at, is controlling you with your own emotions. So if they know that you feel incredibly guilty about something, they'll bring that up over and over again to kind of put you in your place, so to speak. If you find somebody doing that is beating you up with some of your own flaws, you can get out. I promise you that you can. I've been in bad relationships myself, and it's very hard, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
Well, I certainly have seen a lot of women in the past that seem to be very manipulated by their spouses, and I would say, they would have been better off without it. But I was always wondering if that was just them trying to enable something, or it's just very interesting. There's a lot of games that are being played out, insofar as that happening, with people's mind games, if you ask me. But yeah, do you do any lectures on this at all?
I don't. I would like to. I think it would be fun. I haven't yet.
Oh, you do great. Yeah, I still think you should do actually write a book, definitely, or a documentary.
I'm working on it. I've got some stuff in the works right now. I just haven't gotten it all out there yet. I'm writing so much, and I so much enjoy the questions about it. It's amazing to me how much there is kind of just in the field of psychology in general that people don't know about. That really isn't common knowledge. So
right. Yeah. And like you said, these people aren't on any type of medication in the regular world. I mean, in the regular prisons, they're just not. They don't give them any meds or anything, huh? To calm down.
Well, no, and they're really good social chameleons too. So, like, if you are in a relationship with somebody like that, I imagine that in front of, say, your parents or your friends, they look like the best thing ever. They only treat you terribly when they're just with you.
Actors.
And yes,
it's amazing. Well, that sounds like a lot of the people in well, I could say in politics and things like that, even in the field of entertainment, you see a lot of that going on in Hollywood too. I mean, all these people with all these roles that they play, and it's very, very interesting, but very disturbing at the same time.
Oh, I know. Well, I've always actually thought that. I think that in Hollywood and in politics, I agree that the levels of psychopathy are much higher. They have to be. I mean, to be able to turn it on and turn it off like that, I mean, somebody that has normal feelings, it's much harder to do that. But for a psychopath, it's instant.
Right. Yeah. It seems like they really do shut their emotional bodies off without a doubt. Yeah. So in addition to this field, and what is another area that sparks your interest for research? Have you ever thought about going in another direction, or are you going to continue on with this one?
Research, that's an interesting question because of how research is structured. I don't know if it's like this in Europe. I admit to ignorance on that. But just in the U.S., doing research with human subjects, the hoops that you have to jump through to do that is incredible. And academia is a very closed society. It really is. Like, the people that publish continue to publish, studies. So it's not something I ever really considered going into because of all the hoops that I'd have to go through to get there. it's very constricted and not really how I want to spend my time. I'd rather spend my time on the ground working with them than studying them, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what do you see as, if you see any solutions at all for removing this type of a violent pattern in our world? Do you think there's any hope for that, or what do you think? Is there some procedure we can start, or some kind of a deprogramming we can do?
Gosh, I mean, I wish I had that answer, but I do think that there is something that everybody can do on just an everyday level, and it's super simple. But, I mean, this is, okay, so knock on wood again, I do feel like there's a reason that I have never been assaulted in all of my situations. And I've been doing this over a decade now with incredibly dangerous people, with nobody in the room with me. I feel one of the reasons that I have not been assaulted so far is that I treat everybody, no matter what they've done, no matter what I feel about them, no matter how repugnant I feel like they may be, because I know some of their criminal history sometimes walking into a room. Sometimes they are the scariest people I've ever seen. I treat them with as much respect as I would treat my mother, because they're human, and it works out really well. And I feel like if people were able to look up from their phones and their computer screens for a moment and look at their actual neighbors, talk to them, find out what they're like. You know, like, so what if they seem a little weird? Talk to them, start a conversation. It's not going to kill you. And maybe that little conversation was enough to pull whoever it was back from the edge of doing what maybe they're thinking about doing.
Right. Well, conversation, I think, is an icebreaker in general. Definitely.
Yeah.
You know, most people, it's true that they don't even talk to their neighbors anymore. I mean, people don't communicate.
No. They don't know their neighbors anymore. And when some of these mass shooters have done things, they've given away things, like before they do the shooting, they tend to give away most of their possessions because they know they're not going to make it out of the situation. And their neighbors admit to not really knowing anything about them. And that's the thing. It's not that they're just evil people that are destined to do this. They're troubled people that don't see another way out. And if you can help them find a different way and they end up in an office with somebody like me, it's a far better potentiality.
Oh, absolutely. So what about FBI profiling? Have you done a lot of work with the FBI?
I have not, because they profile before the crime is done. And typically FBI profilers are law enforcement. They have very little training in what I do. It's actually kind of a mystery to me, to be quite honest. I don't know why FBI profilers are usually cops, because they're doing it based on crime scene. They're doing it based on the crime scene and the victimology, and they're giving a very broad brush profile. What I do is based on individual characteristics in the human psyche, and I've got a lot more training typically. So what I do is just a different art, but it's on the other side of it. I would love to work with them if they wanted to work with me, but they usually want to work with ex-cops.
Really? I'm surprised, because I could see you going to Quantico for sure.
No, I would love to. Like I said, they usually if you look into it, being an FBI profiler, they want you to be an ex-detective or cop, and I don't really understand that, because they're not talking to these guys the same way that I am.
Yeah, I agree. No, you certainly have a knack for doing what you're doing. There's no doubt about that. I wonder how many other women are doing what you're doing over there.
Now it has exploded. But like I said, when I started at San Quentin, I literally was the only woman under 40, I think, that they had ever seen on death row. I mean, even the cops were making a big deal out of it. They're like, whoa, you know, and I'm like, okay, if you're reacting weird, now the guys are not going to respect me. But now it has just exploded. Like, I can't even tell you some of the girls that, I say girls, they are women, but they're very young. You know, they're coming into the profession, and I'm like, oh my God, they're going to eat you alive. You know, I was so worried about them, and they do fine. I mean, they kick some butt, honestly. The profession of forensic psychology is actually pretty dominated by women, even though the most famous ones, of course, are men.
It's nice to
There's
hear.
usually a lot more women in the profession.
Right. So I imagine that these inmates are better with the women in general than the males. Is that right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, by far. And you know, they used to say that it should only be men, especially at San Quentin. Oh, only men should work here at the men's prison. But you don't realize how quickly, no matter what, you could look like Angelina Jolie on the best day ever, they still start to see you as mom.
That's what I was wondering. Is it that the maternal energy that they're looking for, the nurturing?
Oh, yeah, immediately, yes. I mean, like, even if they're kind of, you know, they say the wrong thing, maybe when they first meet me, you know, they hit on me or whatnot, within one session, 2 sessions, maybe they start to see me as a big sister or mom. And then if some other guy says something to me, I've had guys literally almost physically beat somebody down.
Oh, wow.
For talking to me that way, and they're like, "Shut up, she's my doctor." They become very protective of you because you are their person now.
Hmm. Well, it's interesting. I don't know if our listeners know what you look like, but you're very beautiful, and it's funny.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, and it's with this vibrant, beautiful hair and red hair, and yeah, I was wondering about that and how you were received over there, insofar as just the weird perversion comments and things like that. Yeah, I can only imagine.
I become mom so quickly. It's like it's like a blink of an eye. Like if I always laugh about it. Like if he hits on me in the first session, I'm like, I know it's not going to last. I usually just say, that's inappropriate. And 2 sessions into it, after he's cried and talked to me about his intimate stuff,
Oh.
I stop being that sexualized version of me, which is great.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. We have another question here in the chat from Blasphemous Buddha. Does the doctor think that college kids and others who are afraid of criticism that need safe space have a mental disorder? Oh, yeah. That's a good question.
People that are afraid of criticism?
Yeah, you know how some of the college kids these days are afraid. They're very sensitive. They're almost hypersensitive. So he's saying, does the doctor think that college kids and others who are afraid of criticism that need safe space have a mental disorder?
That's interesting. That might be something for a field of study for the future, because I think it's bordering on becoming like a bona fide disorder. I do, because there's it is a very oversensitive sort of thing. And the other thing I'm seeing is a very narcissistic focus that is going well into adulthood that I used to not see. Mm-hmm. Typically a super narcissistic focus is something that you see up until somebody is about 18. Like when you have a blemish on your face when you're an adolescent, you think everybody's looking at you. Mm-hmm. Like that overly egotistical. Everybody's looking at me when nobody's looking at you. That is going further and further into adulthood now, which is a very disturbing trend. And I think it has a lot to do with social media, like all the selfies that people take selfies constantly, all day, every day. That's all they post. Yep. And usually we only see that until about 17, 18 years of age. And
I think there's something wrong with that. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I just there's something way wrong with it. I can understand upgrading your picture here and there. Yeah, I get that, but yeah.
No, there is, and it's a very, like I said, egotistical, narcissistic focus where the whole world is looking at you all the time when in fact they're not, and you're not seeing the rest of the outside world. Typically, that's an adolescent phenomena that people grow out of, and I'm not seeing people growing out of that now in their early 20s, mid-20s, like they should be.
Yeah, they're very immature. It's almost like they want everybody to hold their hand and pay attention to them, and of course, you're right, nobody's paying attention.
Well, why? I mean, why? And that's the thing. Like, since I'm an adult now, why would they? Exactly. Why would they be paying attention to everything you say and do? That's not normal. They have their own lives, and the fact that there are mid-20-something, even early 30s, not recognizing that is scary to me, especially if they're having children of their own.
Oh, yeah. No, I still think that the youth of America is a big concern right now, and globally speaking, too. I just think that there's some problems. And maybe it's the technology. Maybe it's just something going on with too much of the technology versus just sitting down, reading, talking to people. As we were touching on, people don't really have face-to-face conversations anymore. It's always through computers or texting or this and that.
Well, and they're losing those skills, that ability to, a lot of times when I'm talking to younger guys, I notice that they don't have the skills. Mm-hmm. Even that one generation above them had, of being able to look me in the eye, right, of being able to respond without being very scattered and sort of like 3 seconds of concentration and then they're off on a different topic. And that's very generational, and it does worry me, and I know it's due to the social media.
Mm-hmm. Right. It's almost like they're very distracted. Yeah.
Yeah. Nothing's exciting enough for them.
Yes, that's a good point you make right there. Yeah, that's very concerning. There's no doubt. Well, I think the cure to that would be to just stay away from the computer and social media for a while and get a life and go hike and be, just interact. What do you think?
Yes, and and I mean read books, and I mean there's so many other things to keep our focus that doesn't deal with, like the average attention span has gone from something like 20 seconds down to 12 seconds down to like 3 seconds.
Oh, geez.
Is the average attention span. It's awful, and I know that that's due to the media. I mean, get out into your world, interact with people, talk to people. It will change. It will change you. You think that social media and being noticed is so important, but just talking to a neighbor, volunteering somewhere, getting to know people in your neighborhood will be so much better.
I agree, and even training. The outlet for frustration would be to train, work out, go running, do something, find a hobby. Do something that's productive, channel that energy correctly.
Well, and I don't even disagree. Like some people in my field think that anything like martial arts or like training with guns or something like that in and of itself is wrong because that's a violent activity. But if you do train with somebody that trains, because, I'm around people that deal with firearms all the time, right? If you train with somebody that is trained in that discipline, it is a discipline.
It's a discipline.
And you learn to respect it.
Absolutely.
And work with it correctly. Do I know how to work with guns? Yes, I do. Do I have a permit? Yes, I do. And I treat it respectfully and responsibly.
Well, I'm a second-degree black belt, and let me tell you, it's controlled.
Oh, good for you.
Courtesy, yeah, and there's no violence involved. No, we're actually nonviolent. We're trying to be the counter to violence, So, yeah, so it's too bad that people perceive it like that. That's a shame, but it does teach discipline and self-control and respect. So I was going to tell you, we're almost out of time here. I can't believe it, Clarissa.
Wow.
It's been going super fast, but it's been wonderful to have you on. So if people want to get in touch with you or access any of your work or your research, how would they do that? What's the best way to do that?
If they go to my website, it's www.thecriminalcode.com. They can look at profiles that I've posted on, and I post a new one every week. They can look at different murders that I talk about their history if you don't know about them, and then I go into what might be motivating them psychologically speaking. So, and if you have questions about that, just email me there, and I'll try to answer them to the best of my ability.
It's wonderful, and I know I'm going to have you on Hyperspace in January. I just have to pick a date for you, but I'd love to have you over there too. So.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you so much for having me on the show. My gosh, I mean, really good questions from some of the people listening.
Yeah, they're awesome, aren't they? I want to thank everybody for texting and chat with those questions. It's been fabulous. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in tonight. I hope you appreciated the information in the show. I certainly did. And please stay tuned for Shiny Side Out with David Dundramecki coming up next to sail you on into the night from down under, as they always do with their incredible show here at freedomslips.com. And I think we're going to run out of time here in the Illusion of. We've got about a minute, one plus or minus. But what's your take on Jack the Ripper? What's your impression?
He was not a doctor. That's my take. I do not think that he was a doctor.
Right. Well, I would say he hated women for sure.
Definitely hated women, and I think he may have been somewhat disorganized or going through a psychotic process or starting to.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Well, thank you, Dr. Cole. It's been a pleasure to have you on tonight, and wish you a wonderful week. And thank you, everybody.
Thank you. You too.
Yes, thank you. I'll talk to you soon, everybody. Have a great week.